Good morning. My name is Annie and I'm in my second year at Holy Family Mission this year. I'm from Tipperary and I'd like to share a little about how God has worked in my life. I was raised in the Catholic faith by my parents, and so I grew up going to Sunday Mass, praying the family rosary and being brought to First Saturday devotions with my brother and sister. I think my nature led me to compare myself to others from a young age. I'd notice things that other people could do better, and I'd become disheartened that I couldn't be as good as them. I became a people pleaser in order to gain others' attention and approval. I think at some point I started to believe the same thing about God, that I had to prove to him that I was worthy of being loved, that I had to stand out in some way and do good things so he wouldn't forget me. I wanted his attention, and I was also very curious about him, even if I didn't think he was particularly curious or interested in me. From this upbringing, I didn't doubt God's existence, but there was definitely a strong interest in learning more, and there was definitely a strong interest in learning more about him, but I did doubt his close presence and goodness. I certainly didn't know him as a loving father who wanted a relationship with me. My faith remained the same throughout secondary school. I do remember saying my prayers at night occasionally, and we were all still attending Sunday Mass, but there wasn't really much growth in my faith in God during this time. I certainly didn't understand there was a real capacity for relationship with God. I was unfamiliar with the unconditional nature of God's love for me, and this was reflected in my prayer life. And so when I prayed, I talked at him. There was no dialogue, no spaces for silence to hear, because I didn't realize then that he actually speaks back when we listen. After school, I studied general nursing in UCC. I qualified in 2014 when I was 23 and started working in a hospital in Cork. Heading into nursing, I had the impression that there would be more time to be with and chat to patients, to really get to know them as people. I realised fairly soon into my training that this expectation didn't meet reality on the ground. Between shortages in staff and needing to get the basic nursing tasks completed, I found myself behind in work and being pulled a lot for my time management and prioritisation. Like a lot of nurses, I went into nursing wanting to help people and make difficult times in people's lives a little easier. But so many days I would come home exhausted without any sense of a day well spent on others, or even a job well done. I would fixate on what I forgot to do or who I didn't get enough time to, and I started to feel more like a robot than a person. I couldn't help feeling, is this it? Seriously examining the idea of God suddenly became more important again, as I started to think more deeply about my future. Beyond a career and perhaps a family, what was the point of it all? A pivotal God moment in my life took place on a bus going down to West Cork one summer. I had a conversation with a girl from college who I knew but wasn't very close to about the meaning of life, and I found out that she was a fellow closet Catholic who also wanted to grow in her faith. This encounter gave us both fresh courage, and we became very good friends. We moved to Dublin together a year later in 2016 and started going to young adult adoration in Ballsbridge and Taizé in the city centre close to work. Taizé is a form of worship where there is a holy image with sacred music, liturgical readings and periods of silence, and I found I got a great sense of peace from going to these and really started to get to know more people in their faith. I started to learn more about the Catholic faith, and authentic spiritual life started to bud. A few years into living in Dublin, in 2019, when I was about 28, I found myself hitting a wall. Life got busy with work, study and family, and I started to devote less time to my friends and hobbies. My friends noticed my withdrawal and tried to get through to me, but feeling vulnerable, I isolated myself even further. It was here from this lonely place that I started to reach out to God, more in private prayer and asking for help. But ultimately, it was more of a comfort that somebody might be listening than a belief in the power of prayer. I really thought that this is my problem that I had to fix for myself. God was in my mind at that point, a passive observer somewhere else far away, with little interest in how things turned out, because he had wars and world hunger to contend with. I'd leave him alone and fill him in later on how I was getting on. I decided I was going to fix me by myself. Surprisingly, this didn't work at all. The more I tried to diagnose and treat with Dr. Google and self-help books, the more I found myself falling into despair as the solutions failed to stick long-term, and I seemed hopelessly stuck with a version of me I didn't like. Thankfully, soon into this low period, I met the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia for the first time at a retreat in Limerick, which my friend Ellen invited me along to. I was immediately struck by their joy. I couldn't help but feel uplifted in their presence, and I could see how God was the source of their happiness. This made me reconsider my assumption that one had to be a bit miserable to be Catholic. Being around them renewed my hope, and they really inspired me to dive into seeking God's purpose for my life. It was around this time that I also began to realize the transformative power of confession. During college, I had fallen away from the sacrament of reconciliation, genuinely seeing it as an optional extra in the spiritual life, like the miraculous medal or saying a novena, rather than being an essential part of staying close to God. When I deliberately started going back to confession in my mid-20s, I remember sitting anxiously outside the confessional, palms sweaty and heart racing, and want to run when the previous person came out and I had to go in. I'd be really nervous inside the confessional. I didn't want the priest to know who I was, because then he'd know that I wasn't perfect and I struggled. My anxiety started to ease up once I started to go more often, and the fear of the priest giving out to me for messing up disappeared. A light bulb moment for me was when I came to know that God didn't want me perfect by my own effort. He wanted me to draw close to him so that he could help me and give me a better heart to love with each time. The weight of expectation lifted when it dawned on me that I was always going to be limited by my human nature, but that God was there waiting to lift me up to greater things in his strength. This gave me such an inner freedom. Confession gave me a really good idea where my struggles were, but what made confession unique was it didn't just leave me with the problem. It gave me grace, which helped me to change gradually with God's help. In 2019, I started a temporary nursing specialist position at work, which involved walking with patients and their families through the difficulty of a cancer diagnosis and treatment. This job was a real gift, because it helped me engage in the part of nursing I had been attracted to at the start of my training, and now I had time to give to patients instead of just trying to get everything done in a day. However, I also realised that I couldn't do the job on my own strength. I knew that I needed God's help and all the graces that were on offer to bring to the patients and families I was serving. So I started going to a beautiful local church, St. Saviour's, daily before work, for strength and help during the day. This continued up to March 2020, when the churches were closed due to lockdown. This separation from Mass, the sacraments, and even accessibility to the Blessed Sacrament resulted in a deeper thirst and longing for God than I'd ever experienced before in my life. During this period, I turned to the internet for content on faith. I started watching online masses, listening to podcasts, and binging on YouTube, and I came across Father Patrick's homilies on Paving the Way Home, which I started tuning into daily for spiritual nourishment. He talks a lot about personal relationship with God, which was still a bit of a foreign concept to my heart at the time. I saw that he really believed and had great conviction in what he was saying about Christ. These homilies, combined with an increase in personal effort and faith, helped me deepen my relationship with God in a different way. I took St. Matthew's Gospel literally when it says, "When you pray, go into your inner room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father." And I tried to put aside time each day to sit with God at home and to try and hear his voice. I realized I could meet Jesus within myself, my own inner room, during this time, though I greatly missed meeting him in the church. It was during lockdown in my room that I realized I had no reason to be afraid to sit alone with him. I started to see that I was happier, more grounded, and definitely more at peace with myself when I spent personal time with him for a few minutes in the morning. Another development in my own journey has been to get to know Our Lady better. My dad has always been very close to Our Lady, a relationship strengthened by his experiences relying on her in his own life. Despite his own testimony, I could never fully appreciate her when I was younger, because she was perfectly feminine, and to someone who struggled with comparison, I came up lacking every time. During and after the lockdown in 2020, I found I reached a point when I struggled to draw closer to Jesus, in spite of regular prayer time and time in front of the Blessed Sacrament. One evening in adoration, and after hearing from several people about Mary acting in their own lives, I decided to ask her for help. I asked her to help me get closer to Jesus. On the way out of the church that evening, I was asked if I'd like to join the Legion of Mary, a lay organisation founded by Frank Duff in 1921. The Legion, whose mission it is to glorify God through the holiness of its members, has several million members worldwide in over 170 countries. Through this army of Our Lady, I realised the good work that has been done by all members of the Church around the world. Being a member shattered my perception of Our Lady, and I'm now motivated by her humility, which is actually true strength, rather than being intimidated by it. Finally, it made me realise my own responsibility for spreading the gospel in the world, and it gave me my first taste of mission in talking to people about the beautiful tradition we have in the Catholic faith. That missionary desire led me to Holy Family Mission 2 years ago. I came here to learn more about the faith, to learn how to become a missionary in my own circle of influence. God has exceeded my expectations in every way. I found C.S. Lewis's words to be true. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaking in the roofs and so on. You knew that these jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. It has been here at Holy Family Mission that he has started to root me in my deepest identity in order to become a true and steadfast missionary for the rest of my life. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support of the mission here in Holy Family. I'm so grateful for your prayers and support in making missionary disciples of us all here in Holy Family Mission. We're praying for you too. God bless.